Hey everybody, this is herculespetix, founder, curator, docent, and gift shop employee of the herculespetix Academy of Comic Book Studies. Tonight we're going to be looking at Final Cut, the latest graphic novel from Charles Burns. This came out in 2024, published by Fantagraphics Press. I really appreciate that they made the format of this almost exactly similar to the Charles Burns library he published almost 30 years ago, like El Borba, Big Baby. It almost looks like, yeah, this is a new edition in that, even though it's 30 years later. Before we continue, I must apologize. I got really drunk tonight. But as a commenter, a viewer commented, put your playback speed at 1.5 and I'll sound almost normal. So I'm going to do my best, guys. I really want to review this tonight. Who knows when I'll be sober again. So let's look at this. Just beautiful Charles Burns art. I mean, it's a really nice, hefty graphic novel, guys. Look at this. This is very substantial. God, that back cover, amazing stuff. So let's crack it open. These end papers alone. So Charles Burns is doing something interesting in here. For the most part, it looks just like Charles Burns has always drawn. But have you ever seen a line work like this in Charles Burns? This is almost like he's been looking at Wolverton. Or, like, I've just never seen him doing stuff like this. I know he was always capable of doing it. Charles Burns can draw anything he wants. But this image, this weird, bizarre, I don't know, creature? Or, whatever it is, appears throughout. And it's always drawn in this style, which is very different than the almost, clear line style of Charles Burns. It's not literally ligne clair, or however the French say it. But, he's a very clean line. Not a lot of shading and scratchy lines. Just beautiful drawing. But, man, these are some of the nicest end papers I've ever seen in a book. Really nice. Here's the title page. Oh, I'm sorry, guys. I said it was Fantagraphics. It's Pantheon Books. Oh, look at that beautiful illustration. Really nice. So let's begin with chapter 1. This is just almost like a splash page cover for the chapter 1. Once again, just totally gorgeous. This is also, I've never seen Charles Burns color like this, with the almost like charcoal pencil maybe. I don't know, I'm not an artist, but it definitely looks different. Almost looks like Carol Swain dropped in to do this coloring. But then this is just perfect, typical Charles Burns. So we start off, we're introduced to our protagonist, Brian. And he's the point of view here in the narrative captions. He's an artist, and he seems like a loner. He's at this party, and he's just in the kitchen drawing in his sketchbook. He doesn't really want to hang out and drink beer like all the other teenagers. Once again, it's the typical Charles Burns milieu. It's teenagers in some nebulous time, the 70s, maybe the 80s, definitely way before the internet, before cell phones. He just loves that time period and the milieu of just how teenagers lived back then. And just from his narration, we realize, Brian's a different type of guy. He's not your average dude. He's drawing this amazing, science fiction art. Just really beautiful stuff. And now we see that whatever this is for the first time. And like I said, the texturing, the inking, this does not look like Charles Burns to me. He usually doesn't put this much noodling and, inking in his work. It's gorgeous though. And I really do think it reminds me of Wolverton. I know I say that a lot. A lot of artists remind me of Wolverton, but it's definitely a new quiver in Charles Burns' a new arrow in his quiver. So he's at this party, drawing, and this woman walks up behind him, a teenage girl, And she's like, oh my God, your art's so amazing. She's gorgeous. And it seems like Brian's instantly just like, oh my God, this girl is beautiful. Why is she talking to me? And it turns out that she knows his friend Jimmy, his best friend Jimmy. She's like, oh yeah, I was just kind of ribbing you. Jimmy told me you hate it when people ask you questions about your art. I couldn't resist. I was kind of ribbing you. So she basically says, oh, come on, hang out with us. Don't hang out here in the kitchen drawing. And he's just like, even though he's very smitten with her, he's just like, oh, well, I'm going to finish up this drawing and then I'll be there. And then she announces to him that she's going to be the lead actress in their new movie. So Brian and Jimmy have been making movies since they were like young teenagers. And they're still making movies. So he's going to be working with her and he's kind of excited, also kind of scared, I think. Of course, he's a little paranoid about, like, she knows Jimmy? What did Jimmy tell her about me? Because he kind of knows he's a weirdo. God, look at this, guys. Even though it's just some kind of weird granite rock. It's just the technical skill. Charles Burns is just amazing. So now I love the fact that they do this. And to be honest, comics don't do this enough. One of the things comics can do, which most mediums can't. So all of a sudden, this woman's named Lori, by the way. I'm sorry I didn't mention that. All of a sudden, the narrative switches to Lori's point of view. So now all the captions are Lori speaking or thinking. And it's really effective in this graphic novel how they jump around from perspective, where it's because that's one of the great things about fiction or characters is that in a scene I want to see what everyone's thinking. That's kind of I wish in real life I could do that. I wish in real life I could be like, oh my God, what is my friend thinking right now? I don't know. So now it's from her point of view. It's Jimmy's birthday. He's showing a bunch of old, 10-minute little Super 8 reels, like the kind you'd see in Warren magazines, like the Flesh Eaters, but it's just 10 minutes. So he's showing them in the basement, which is something we would do back in the 70s and 80s. We didn't have VCRs. So now Lori mentions, she's like, oh, look, Brian's here. And she knows that Brian's kind of a weirdo. So Jimmy announces, like, guys, there's a special feature tonight on my little Shock Theater basement show screenings. I'm going to show the movie that me and Brian made back when we were like 14. Which, back then that was a big deal. And so all of his friends are all excited. And we realize from Jimmy's dialogue, he's kind of an egotist. He's like the Stan Lee to Brian's Jack Kirby. Brian's the talented one. He's a gifted artist. Jimmy's just kind of like the huckster showman who takes all the credit. Brian doesn't care, though. So now the movie starts. So this is the Super 8 movie they made. Of course, there's a UFO. You can see the string. And this little pink worm comes out of this alien ship and kind of slips into this kid's food. This is young Jimmy, by the way. He's 14. Just like all those movies, kids would do this in the 70s, make little movies, and they had to be the actors, so they couldn't hire adults or ask their parents to do it. So Jimmy, even though he's 14, he's doing this role. It's very Invasion of the Body Snatchers, like he eats this pink worm and now he's possessed, by the alien. But now, Brian's acting very differently. Brian's definitely what we would call bipolar today. Back in the 70s, there was no terminology for this. And he's being super friendly, very I don't want to say forward with Lori, but he's actually like has his hand on the base of her back, and he's just holding it there. And believe me, Lori notices. She's like, wow, this guy just seemed like a little weirdo, antisocial, bizarre guy, but he's being really friendly and actually, almost flirtatious. And he's joking with her, talking about the movie, giving her a little behind the scenes information about the movie. And then there's this scene that Brian's like, oh, you got to see this scene. It's great. And, it's a gore scene where the character who's possessed by the alien worm stabs someone in the eye with a fork. Lori's not impressed. She's like, God, that's fucking gross. What was wrong with you guys? Which, as a young slasher movie fan, I feel the same way now as an adult. I was like, why did me and my friends want to see these movies that were just gory and innocent people being killed? It's kind of weird. I think I grew up okay. I never wanted to murder anyone, so I don't think it's harmful, but it's also kind of weird. So she's of that mindset. She's like, oh, I can't believe you guys made this. And, we see Lori's thoughts, and she's like, I don't even want to watch this. It's kind of gross. It's starting to creep me out. She's also kind of thinking about, like, why is Brian so warm and friendly all of a sudden? And now we have the ending. Young Brian shows up as some kind of FBI agent, and he shoots the bad guy. And Lori jokingly just says, hi, you guys were total psychos. You probably still are. That was kind of weird. So now the lights come up, the movie's over, and then all of a sudden, Brian totally changes back to his weird self. He has this distant look in his eyes. Lori even asks, she says, are you okay? And because she's asking him, she's like, what's the movie that I'm going to star in, the new movie about? I really want to know, because I'm going to be starring in it. And Brian gets really weird and distant. And all Brian says is, the movie's about my head. It's about all the fucked up shit going inside my head. And he's like staring off into space. And Lori notices this, and she actually says, oh, great, now you're not even going to look at me? Because he's just looking off. And she realizes, okay, this guy's a weirdo. I'm going to go. And she remembers the words Jimmy told her. So Jimmy said, Brian, he's a great guy, really smart, but be careful. Sometimes it gets a little weird. So now we have terminology for this. We would say, oh, he's on the spectrum, whatever. But, back in the 70s, you're just like, this guy's weird. Now we see this totally alien vista. And this is a dream Brian's having. His skin is a deep red. He's in this natural setting. He doesn't remember how he got here. He steps off of a cliff and is just floating around. I never heard this term before, but he's talking about, he's floating over these switchbacks, which I guess is the term for those winding roads that go up mountains. A switchback. Charles Burns is just so fucking precise. It's almost like, wait, did a human draw this? Or is this like made by some computer or something? It's amazing how clean and precise his line is. So now he's still dreaming. He's by a campfire. He hears a strange sound, like a moaning. He sees a cocoon, or a pupa, a giant pupa. And when he rips it open, it's Lori. She says, is this going to be a part of your movie? And she even mentions, this is kind of like Invasion of the Body Snatchers, the body pot. And he says, oh, wait, this is just an excuse for you to see me naked. And the pupa rips open and she's totally naked. She says, take a good look. And there's a close-up on her bush. And Brian thinks, so now it's Brian's point of view. She's right. I want to see her naked. I want to stay here and be with her. But I'm starting to slip away. I keep hearing that distant clicking sound. It's almost like you can hear the sound of a camera filming at all times. And we even, as Brian walks away, we see Brian's point of view. He's just literally wandering off in a daze. And we can hear Laurie saying, Brian, come on, you don't have to go. Why do you always do this? So we realize Brian's, he's a little off. Even though it's just a dream, but we'll actually see echoes to this. He's dreaming this because it's happened before. These organic shapes he draws are, do you call rocks organic? Whatever, natural shapes. Once again, guys, I'm sorry. That is so Wolverton, the line work here. And we just see these weird, I don't know, fauna? Flora? I don't know what they are. Not fauna, I'm sorry. Some kind of weird pupa sac. Now we cut away. We're back to Laurie's point of view. So it seems like it's a few days later, maybe a week later. She's thinking to herself, why am I doing this? So she's obviously likes Brian. Something is intriguing about him. She definitely admires his art skills. And she's agreed to come to this other part of the city on the bus. She has to take like 2 transfers. Makes a little map for herself, which I thought was funny as an old man. Where like, oh yeah, I remember having to do that. Like now we have Google Maps. I can't remember the last time I've been lost. But yeah, I remember making little maps because I didn't know where I was. So she's really second guessing herself. She agreed to come on this date. Brian invited her to a movie. And it's in a shady part of town. There's crazy panhandlers yelling at her, calling her a fucking bitch for not giving them $1. And finally she makes it to the theater and she sees Brian just squatting down sketching as he always does. So, you know, there's lots of awkward pauses. It's always weird with Brian. But he's being cordial, you know, he's not being that weird. So they go into this weird little theater and they're going to watch Invasion of the Body Snatchers. He mentions that he's seen it before. In fact, he came the week before and invited her because he was like, I think you'll like this. Laurie is still just like, God, this guy's weird. Why am I here? What am I doing? And the movie starts. Now, guys, this is fascinating to me. Charles Burns totally changes his art style for the scenes from the movie of Invasion of the Body Snatchers. It's just amazing, photorealistic, beautiful art. And so different than, you know, the reality of this comic. I love that he chose to do this because, you know, movies are like this other reality, maybe a heightened reality to some people. They were to me when I was a teenager, where I just watched movies all the time. And I probably thought that was more real than my surroundings. But incredible panels here. Now, Brian doesn't say a word. The whole movie, he's enraptured. Laurie, of course, is just like, it's like I'm not even here. He doesn't even know I'm here. He's so into this movie. God, look at this illustration here. Amazing stuff. Brian starts crying. Laurie doesn't want to say anything. She's actually just like, I don't want to embarrass him. I'll just pretend I didn't see this. And I'll stop looking over at him. So the movie ends. Of course, Brian is kind of in his weird spot. But then he gets friendly again. It's the other Brian. And he says, hey, I'm so wired by that. Let's go get a coffee. And Laurie really likes Brian when he's like this. She definitely has an affinity for him. And she's like, yeah, I guess I do want to go out and get coffee with you. They see that panhandler, and she kind of ribs him, kind of makes a joke about him. And of course, he curses at her again. So they make it to this little beatnik cafe, and they get espressos. She says, I'd really like to look at your sketchbook. And we get to see more of this beautiful art. These are really beautiful. And I love how Charles Burns, once again, is drawing in a completely different style. He's trying to approximate what this young kid Brian draws like. It doesn't look like Charles Burns. Especially this one. I like this. It's like some great, almost looks like Danny Hellman or something. Dirty Danny. Look at this. You would never guess that's Charles Burns in a million years, right? That's Jimmy. Him drawing Jimmy. It's amazing that he can just totally draw this other style. Unrecognizable style. But then, I guess Brian drew his dream. Basically, Lori naked in this pod. And so, of course, when she gets to that, he's just all like, are you okay with that? I'm not in trouble, am I? And Lori's cool with it. She's just like, oh, it's fine. It's no big deal. It's just kind of weird, you know, a little weird. And then even though this awkward moment happens, Lori says, let's get another coffee. So Lloyd definitely has this affinity for Brian, even though she also knows already that he's a little weirdo. I do gotta say, you know, Charles Burns I've been reading since the 80s. And there's I gotta say a few things that are a little off. Like, look at her nose here. Her nose never looks like that. And I've never seen Charles Burns be inconsistent. He's always he's like a Swiss watch, how tight his art is. But I just thought that was very strange for Charles Burns. The nose is a little off. I mean, Lori doesn't have a little button nose. She has a nice nose with character. But that doesn't look like the rest of the comic. God, this page. That is so beautiful. This is a beautiful pinup, basically. So this is another dream. We see that. I gotta make a name for that thing. The flying pod extractor. It's spewing out these pods. One of them opens, and it's Brian's in it. But it's basically, even though this crazy, fantastical stuff has happened, it's just Brian's thoughts. How am I going to film this movie? How can I ever capture this vision I have in my head? I've got storyboards. I've got endless sketches. But I don't have the technical skills to capture this on film. So now we see Brian. He did a little rough cut. He made this monster or whatever it is, and he did a little test reel to see how it looks. Lori helped him. So Lori's in the film, you know, holding the alien creature or whatever. And then he invites Lori over to watch this test reel. He's like, hey, I'll show you how it came out. But Lori, without Brian's knowledge, invited Jimmy over and Tina. She just thought, yeah, we'll have a fun night. They bring beers and Cheetos and, you know. Brian says, guys, he's kind of startled. He didn't expect this. But he doesn't want to be uncool. So he's like, oh, yeah, guys, but we have to be really quiet. My mom's asleep upstairs. And they're like, it's fine, you know, whatever. So this girl, Tina, is also, you know, she's a friend of all of theirs. This is her introduction. So Jimmy even says, yeah, I brought some movies over, some Super 8 reels. We could have a total little shindig. And so once again, they show one of their teenage movies. This one's called The Claw. It's so typical. Just these kids dressing up as adults. He's got a gardening claw as his hand. And, you know, their attempts at being gory. And Brian notices, it's from Brian's point of view once again, this chapter. And he's like, yeah, Lori's not really, hasn't said anything. It's weird. I wonder if, is she mad at me? He doesn't know what's going on. Typical teenage stuff though, you know? So they continue watching the movie, and then we meet Brian's mom. Brian's mom, I guess, comes down and says, "What's going on? Are you okay? I heard voices." And we realize that Brian's mom is a total drunk. Brian, in his caption, says, she's drunk. I can totally see it in her eyes. She's fucked up again. She makes a big deal about Lori. She says, "Who is this girl? Her hair is so beautiful. She's gorgeous." Tina just laughs about something, and she gets a little surly. The mom's all like, "Why are you laughing? Are you laughing at me? What's so funny?" So, she's a drunk. She's, well, like me, but I'm not surly. I'm just dumb, stupidly talking about this amazing graphic novel. So he basically gives his mom, like, "Mom, just go upstairs, Mom. I'll be up in a second." He's embarrassed, as you probably would be. He goes upstairs. We realize his mom just sits in this chair, chain smoking. And she didn't even touch the meal he made for her. So we realize Brian is basically her parent. He looks after her. She's just a really bad drunk. He cooks for her. He tries to get her to eat stuff. She won't even eat. She's so far gone in her, alcoholism. When he gets back downstairs, everyone's left. Tina and Lori and Jimmy. He's like, "Fuck them. I can't believe they ditched me." But he sees a note from Lori. Even though she didn't say anything all night, she's like, "Oh, I'm sorry about everything. I'll make it up to you. Call me. I even bought you some Twizzlers because you mentioned how much you liked them when we saw that movie." So once again, we realize, Lori definitely has this affection for Brian, even though he's a weirdo. And of course, he's watching his test reel, and the part he's most fascinated by is there's a few minutes left on the film, and so he just decided to film Lori. And of course, he's obviously very smitten with her. So now we're back to Lori's point of view, and they're starting their film. They basically travel really far out into these woods, and they're doing the opening scene. So Jimmy and Brian are directing her, like, "Okay, come down this little hill and look in a certain direction." And then Tina's there just to hang out, and Tina's goofing around. She's like, "I'm ready for my close-up," and she moons everyone. And Lori thinks it's very funny, but Brian's very annoyed. Brian's very serious about his filmmaking. She's like, "Knock it off, Tina. This is serious shit." Tina doesn't get it. She's like, "You guys are making a whole movie, basically. Who gives a shit?" But she has no idea how serious Brian. Even Jimmy's pretty serious, too. They really want to make this movie. So we see the filming shots, and in Lori's thoughts, she realizes that this sucks. This is kind of boring. I just walking around. They tell me to look in a certain direction. I imagine it is pretty boring. She's hungry. So finally, the day shooting's over. She's ready for a drink. Tina's there. Tina's made a beautiful dinner, pasta dinner, and she offers her a drink, and she starts feeling much better. She's like, "Oh yeah, I needed a drink." And so we realize these two are pretty friendly, and Tina's basically saying, "Oh, this guy should lighten up." But Lori does admit that the best part of her day was when she did that, when she mooned the camera. She was like, that was the one fun thing I had today. So there's this other couple there I forgot to mention, Dana and James. And they're friends, and it seems like they're hooking up. They're very pally with each other. And of course, Brian's off in his other world just drawing. She says, "Oh, what are you drawing now?" And it's a beautiful drawing of Lori. Now, Tina's had a little too much to drink. And it almost sounds like Tina's a little jealous of Lori. because Lori is like really beautiful, but also just like kind of just drunkenly spouting shit. And she's giving Brian shit because Brian's not drinking. You know how drunks will do that, like, have a drink. Brian's like, I don't feel like drinking. And she won't let it go. So Lori, being a sweet girl, she's just like, hey, leave him alone. He's fine. But Tina keeps going. And she's kind of embarrassing herself. Now we cut away to a few hours later. Brian, once again, in his weird ways, just kind of leaves. Gets a sleeping bag and sleeps alone under the sky. Leaves the cabin where they're staying. But he feels himself slipping away, which happens to him. Because at some point in the book, Jim even mentions, like, did you take your pills today? So he is, diagnosed. Something's wrong with his brain. But he doesn't like to take the pills because they deaden him. So he's constantly going in and out of some kind of mental state. So now he's dreaming once again about this strange thing, alien thing. And in this dream, he sees Lori walking into this cave. And then he's watching her on a film screen. And she basically does what Tina did. Bends over and shows her ass. Obviously sublimated. He's very attracted to Lori, but he doesn't know how to deal with it. There's the drawing he made. Once again, Charles Burns, just virtuoso, like, I'm going to draw like a really gifted 17-year-old artist. Not like me at all. This is like the kind of stuff like the best artist in your school would put in the yearbook or something. Well, actually better. Not many kids could draw that good. So now we see it's late at night. Lori wakes up to pee in the middle of the night. And the bathroom door is locked. Lori realizes that Tina's in there, and Tina's like, don't open the door. So finally she comes in, and Lori's puking her guts out. Made a huge mess of the toilet. So we realize, like, Lori's a sweetheart. She totally takes care of Tina. Tina's like, oh my God, I ruined the night. I'm such a dumb idiot. She's like, it's fine, Tina. Let's get you in the shower. And she still has to pee, so she has to clean the toilet first. She was like, I hope you don't mind while you shower. I'm going to pee. I really got to pee. Totally gets her all cleaned up, gets her a toothbrush, and puts her to bed. And Tina admits to her, she says, I love you. Not like just as a friend. She says, I like you a lot. She says, I like you a lot more than Brian or Jimmy or any of those guys ever will. She's basically declaring her love for her. Of course, Lori doesn't know what to say. So she says, we'll talk about this tomorrow, I promise. But she just got some sleep. But she does give her a kiss on the cheek. Tina turns her mouth at the last second, and they kiss on the lips. And she says, Tina, you're not going to let this go, are you? And Tina says, no, I'm not going to let this go. So even though Tina's very drunk, there's obviously something she's thought about. It's not just because she's drunk. God, these just beautiful scenes of nature that Charles Burns draws. These deep, rich colors, because, it's night. So Lori just goes for a walk to clear her head after all this craziness. And she looks over. She sees Brian. Brian's out just sitting on this little cliff looking over, or hill, looking over the lake. She almost doesn't want to, she wants to pretend she didn't see him. She's almost like, oh, shit. But Brian's in a good mood. He's in one of his good moods. So she's like, okay, it's okay. He's a warm, friendly, kind of funny. He shows her latest sketch. Of course, it's of Lori again. And she falls asleep on his sleeping bag uses it as a pillow. And she wakes up right as the sun rises. Now, when she wakes up a little while later, and Brian's filming her, which is pretty fucking creepy. And he's like, I'm sorry, the light was so perfect. I just want to finish up this roll. Is that okay? And she's like, no, that's fine. Chapter 3. Another beautiful little, almost like end paper illustration in black and white. Another beautiful, like, pin-up, basically. God. So beautifully drawn. His coloring is amazing. So now we're back to Brian's point of view. He's waiting for Jimmy to pick him up. And I guess he's reminiscing about the night before he saw the movie The Last Picture Show. So I guess this is the early 70s. I think that movie came out in like 1970, 1972. And we get to see more of this beautiful photorealistic illustration because, you know, film is more real than life. And he is blown away by this movie. You know, he's a guy who likes monster movies. And so now, basically, this is his first, like, real, serious film he's ever seen, and it blows him away. He can't stop thinking about it. So finally, Jimmy shows up with all the crew, and now we actually see them heading to this campground. So now we're having, it's kind of a weird narrative style where, even though we saw them filming, but now we're flashing back to how they got to that film site. And Brian comments, and you know, the captions. He's like, oh, Lori seems a little standoffish. I hope it didn't freak her out or whatever. And Brian starts to tell Jimmy about The Last Picture Show. And he's going on and on. Now, Jimmy's known Brian since he was a little kid. And remember, he told Lori he can be a little weird. So just the way Brian's talking about The Last Picture Show, he won't stop. He's just like, are you okay, Brian? Have you taken your meds? And Brian just keeps going. It's not like he's shaming him or like telling him to stop. He's just like, you know how you can get when you go off on a thing. So they drive to this beautiful countryside, this forest. And Brian is thinking about how when they get back to town, he'd really like to take Lori to see The Last Picture Show. And we see some more beautiful shots from it. Sybil Shepherd. God, look at that. Just the illustrative prowess going on there in the background scenery. Now we're back to Lori's point of view. I really love this narrative conceit here. So we get to see everyone's point of view. So now Lori, they're hiking up all these switchbacks, up and up this mountain. She's not an athlete. She hates it. She's like, I'm so freaking tired. This sucks. Every time they take a rest, Brian is just filming her. And Jimmy's even commenting on about like, he tells Lori, it's like, hey, have you noticed Brian's like slipping into one of his manic trips? Basically, she was in the back seat, so he tells her about The Last Picture Show and his rant. He's like, yeah, he's really kind of spinning it out of control. It's a little spooky to me. But you know, Lori's just like, I'll be okay. So they continue on their trek up to this film site. Got this beautiful lake in the mountains. So finally they set up camp. Tina and Lori are palling around. They go fishing. And now they're all around the campfire. They finally set up camp and they're all ready to just relax before the day's shooting tomorrow. Of course, the two young lovers go off to canoodle. And they start having sex. And so around the campfire, they can hear their lovemaking. you can hear like, oh, and Brian's just like, what is that? What is that? Of course, everyone else is like, that's the sound of hot monkey love. But Brian's such a naive weirdo. He's just like, oh, that sounds weird. So now Tina and Lori, they're sharing a tent. They go to bed. They're both tired. And Tina brings it up. She says, we never really talked about what I told you that night I was really drunk. You said you'd talk to me about it the next day. I'm sober now because she's not drinking. She doesn't want to be embarrassed again. I still feel exactly the same way about you. And Lori says, I'm all talked out. Can we not have this conversation now? I'm just so tired. How about if I give you a real kiss? And there's this like kind of sexy little moment, and she gives her a real kiss. Now we cut away to this just symbolic image, I guess, of sexuality. So now it's back to Brian's point of view. They're filming the pod scene, which he dreamt about. Of course, Tina's around just being silly. God, look at this lake. This scenery is amazing. So they go swimming. They take a break from filming. And, of course, the girls strip down to the bathing suits and/or underwear. And Brian is filming her. At one point, he even lowers the camera to film her crotch. And she notices, but this is how comfortable they are around each other. She's just like, hey, watch where you're pointing that thing. She doesn't get mad. She's just like, what are you doing? The whole time, Brian is kind of having one of his moments where he's trying to hold on. He's seeing lights behind his eyes. This is just normal for Brian. He has to fight to remain in reality. So they're eating lunch together, and we just see that Brian is, obviously very smitten with Lori. And as they walk back to their campsite, their tents from this little filming location, like he's on cloud nine. He's just like, I wish this moment could last forever. It's been such a perfect day. I wish I could make time stand still. Which I think we've all felt like that. And it never works. Things always turn to shit eventually. Or just turn not to as nice as you hoped. I guess it gets dark. They don't make it back to the campsite in time, so it's dark. And so some people are tripping, so they all decide to hold hands. And just holding her hand as they walk is just like heaven for Brian. So they make it back to the campsite. That couple's waiting for them, the lovey-doveys. They made dinner. They start drinking vodka. Everyone's happy. It's all good. Now, Brian's so in the moment. He says, hey, pass that vodka over here. And Jimmy knows that Brian doesn't drink, and he probably shouldn't drink. He probably seen him get drunk once or twice before and been like, oh. She was like, hey, Brian, take it easy. But Brian is so happy. And in the moment, he just keeps chugging. And then we just see this black page. Obviously, Brian blacks out. Now we see another dream image. Still that weird creature. He's flying through the sky. And even in his dream, he's thinking about how, I love going to the movies. But the sad thing is eventually the credits roll. The lights come on, it's time to go home. That's always the worst part, going home. So Brian would love to just escape into fantasy forever. He goes home. He's got a drunk mom he's got to take care of. He's not happy. That's why he loves movies so much. So he's still in this dream. And in the dream, he actually comes to his own house. The house is filthy. Dishes piled up. But when he goes into his mother's room, it's not his mother. It's Lori. He wakes up, just like, oh, what the fuck was that? He wakes up, he sees a pile of foul-smelling vomit outside the tent. He's like, oh, what is that horrible smell? What is that? He has no recollection. It's obviously his. We quickly realize, yeah, he drank that vodka, he got really sick, he puked up. And because he's like, there's vomit on my shoes and pants. Why'd I go to bed with my shoes on? What's going on? He has no recollection. So then he's going to go to Lori's tent that she shares with Tina, because she still has Lori's watch, which she took earlier so she wouldn't ruin it in the lake. And as she comes up to her tent, it looks like things have heated up very quickly between Lori and Tina. They're obviously, it's the sound of lovemaking in there. And as you can imagine, a weird, sensitive guy like Brian, he's just devastated. He just sits in front of the tent, watching and listening. And then they're kind of done. Lori has to go out to pee. She's naked, and she comes out just to see Brian just sitting there staring at the flap of the tent. Pretty crazy. I love this image too. It's like, just Brian's a hollow outline, a silhouette. He's been blasted by this experience. The background, though, is completely amazingly detailed, and just this white image, really striking silhouette. Now we see, obviously, time has passed. And so pretty much it looks like Tina and Lori are a couple, which was pretty hard back then. She had to be pretty secretive. Now, yes, definitely months have passed. They're sitting in a park together. Tina says, do you want me to come with you? And Lori's like, no, I got to do this myself. Once again, she has a little map she's drawn for herself, because she barely remembers going to Brian's house that time. She's going to Brian's house. She hasn't seen Brian in months, ever since the filming, because obviously Brian checked out after, he loved Lori. He realized he was with Tina, and nobody's really seen him since then. But she wants to, I guess Jimmy made some excuses, like, you should have some kind of closure with Brian. We do need to pick up the film reel from him. Would you do it? Which I think would be a good thing. Just for you to, say goodbye to Brian, if that's what it comes to, or just see him again. You guys were good pals. So she comes in, she tries to make it lighthearted, and Brian's definitely not in his warm, friendly mood. He's definitely weird. He's watching a movie on TV, and even while he's talking to her, he keeps just looking over at the TV. His uncomfortable pauses. He's staring at her like she's a kind of strange alien creature. But then for the most part, he just keeps looking back on the TV. He just starts telling her about the movie he's watching. He's watching The Last Man on Earth with Vincent Price. The Omega Man movie from the 50s. And he's describing it to her. Lori's trying to make small talk with him, but he just keeps talking about the movie, about this planet of vampires, and she realizes he's a million miles away. There's sketchbooks stacked up next to his chair. So he's still drawing, which might be a good sign, but he's not showing them to anyone. He just sits there, obviously sits there all day watching movies and drawing. She looks through his sketchbook, and there's, she basically says, I find Brian's art so intriguing. They're intense, mysterious, and these are actually quite interesting. There's Sybil Shepherd, but she notices that he has lots of, not only pictures of Sybil Shepherd, just, being beautiful, put like erotic pictures of Sybil Shepherd. And then the mom comes in, and we quickly realize, I guess the mom talks about going to a meeting. The mom cleaned herself up. So at least there's a little happiness in this household. So the mom has gotten all, healed up. And it seems like she's a good mom again. She's not a drunk. But now Brian just seems totally lost. I think he mentions even that he doesn't want to take his medication. He doesn't want to feel dead inside. He's kind of really short with his mom, almost rude to her. And Laurie says, I can't believe you talk to your mom like that. And he's just like, yeah, she really gets on my nerves. Her pathetic, whiny voice. And finally, Brian says, I'll get that roll of film for you. And as he basically ushers her to the door, it's like she can tell that he just wants her out of there. And even as he's saying goodbye to her, and his eyes keep looking back at the TV, like all he cares about is watching this stupid old science fiction movie. Laurie just can't wait to get back to the park and see Tina. Tina's waiting at the park for her to be supportive, And she starts crying, just telling her how sad it is to see Brian is just really plummeted mentally. It is like hopeful. They really do seem to have this great love where Tina's very supportive and she's like, it's okay, it's sad, but let me make you dinner. I'll make you happy, we'll get some red wine. And then Laurie says, I want to tell you something. And she basically says, you're the one I want to be with forever. I love you so much. Of course, Tina's very happy to hear that. And we see this amazing cryptic image. This door leading into a rock wall. Beautifully drawn, by the way. And so now finally we see maybe a week later, Brian has come out to one of Jimmy's little film screenings, his little get-togethers. And they're basically watching the rough cut of the movie they made. And we see all the scenes that we saw filming. There's even Tina mooning the camera. And now we're at Brian's point of view. Brian's watching this just so basically defeated. He's like, this is terrible. It's painful to watch. No amount of editing could save this. This is just utter trash. It's like nothing I envisioned in my head. Which I'm pretty sure nothing would ever match what's in his head, because there's some crazy shit in his head. He's almost like a young David Cronenberg, without the skill to pull it off. And now he says, it's a total mess, but I know what the real movie should look like. I know every shot by heart. And now we see Brian's mind envisioning how the film should look. Even the credits are very slick, like nice, not handwritten credits. And we see the same exact movie, the same experience of driving up to the mountains, but now it's all how Brian wanted it to be. If you notice, Brian is not sitting in the front, just as he wanted. He's sitting in the backseat with Laurie. There's still elements of the movie, like they see these weird creatures flying through the sky. But in the movie, when I sit around the campfire, Brian and Laurie are totally hitting it off. They're holding hands. So basically, Brian just is envisioning this movie in his head that's really just, it is the crazy science fiction movie they were filming, but it's really just how he wants things to be. And he's got it all storyboarded in his head. He knows exactly what he wanted. He just couldn't make it a reality. On celluloid, on Super 8, or in reality. Now we see them watching that little test reel that they worked on together. And like I said at the end, There was a minute left on the reel, so he just filmed Lori. And you can tell that to him is the most valuable film he's ever made. Just having this, Lori off the cuff. And we see him just totally glazed over watching this. And Lori sitting next to him once again saying, Brian's lost it. Brian thinks to himself, I'm slipping away again, a slow fade. But Lori's hand is still there. Warm and real. Now we get back to the fake movie in Brian's head. Lots of crazy stuff. Tina's naked in it. We see Jimmy naked. And then he realizes that he actually doesn't know every scene in the movie. There's a scene where she goes into this house, which they filmed earlier. And he's like, but who's inside waiting for her? I don't know. I haven't thought that out yet. I haven't storyboarded that in my head. And he says, it's me. It's always been me. I've been waiting for Lori my entire life. He says, she's relieved to see me, but then she catches a glimpse of my horrible alien reflection in the chrome toaster and freaks out. Fuck that. I'm not going to let it end that way. He scratches out this panel in the storyboard. She's going to find me in a different room, my room, the room I always wanted. So now he's totally devolving into fantasy. He lives in this perfect room with a beautiful artist, a real artist table, bookshelves lined with amazing books. Even his bed has a Native American blanket that he remembers from a nice time in his childhood. It's just this perfect setting for him. And now in this version of the movie, the new fantasy version, Lori walks into the room and finds Brian. And instead of being a horror movie, science fiction movie, he's turned it into a beautiful romance where Lori looks in his eyes and there's a warm, beautiful smile on her face. He says, there's something I want to show you. Come to the window. Deep in the valley, the alien invasion is heating up. The aliens are destroying all the cities in the distance, but we're safe. They'll never get up here. How do I end this? I want it to be a happy ending. Is that asking too much? I want it to end with a perfect kiss I could cherish for the rest of my life. And they have the perfect kiss. But this is all in Brian's head. Oh, it's so sad. And now we see the end, the credits of the end. And this part, I almost thought this page was not necessary. It says, the clicking drone of the projector finally stops. Off in the distance, I hear a voice. Is that Jimmy? What is Jimmy saying? Lights. Can somebody get the lights? And that's the end. So I thought it was a perfect ending right here. Like, obviously, Brian is just totally descended into his fantasy. But this, I find this very quizzical here, this ending. But maybe it's a sign that, like, yeah, Jimmy's lost. I'm sorry, Brian's lost. But he's still in that room watching the first, edit of their movie. Oh, man. I gotta say, guys, I read this last night. And I know it sounds weird. I wish I had better words to describe it, but the feeling it brought up in me was almost like literally emotion, an emotion I've never felt before. Obviously sadness, obviously this, almost like this melancholy, but it wasn't quite. I can't describe it, but literally, whatever this emotion was, I've never had it before. And it was different than any way I've ever felt. I don't know if this could be attributed to Charles Burns' masterful storytelling, or I was just chemically imbalanced last night. I don't know what it was, but something about this, the last 20 pages of this book hit me in such a weird way, a good way, where I'll be honest, like compared to like Black Hole a lot of Charles Burns' work. I didn't think this was as, amazingly entertaining, engaging, as well constructed as some of his great, masterpieces. But there's something about it where it hit me hard, and this character sketch of this kid Brian, there's something really tragic about it. And I don't know. So, we got some more beautiful end papers. Actually, that's the same end papers as the front. So there you go, guys. Final cut by Charles Burns. I'm so glad he's still out there making amazing works. And I've actually bought this pretty not far after it came out. But because of the vagaries of the channel, how I like to spread out artists, I've been waiting all this time to read it. I was so thrilled last night when I got to bed and I was like, I can finally read this book. I've been waiting to read it. Because I didn't want to have to read it, twice. I should have, though, because it's worth it. So, guys, totally recommended. You might think, Black Hole's better. I still think Black Hole's better. But this is some powerful, good shit. And Charles Burns I'm just so glad he's out there making great graphic novels. One of the greats of all time in the cartooning medium. And, just a couple years old. But I'm sure it's still out there because it's from Pantheon. So hope you guys like looking at this with me. And I hope my voice wasn't slurring too much. And I hope to see you next time here at the Herculespetix Academy of Comic Book Studies.